Warning, the podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Umi Southworth, Part 3.
So the next day when it begins to become light out,
we haven't gone to bed.
We have not. We decide that an article search would be great. Now, so we arranged to have that done. And lo and behold, if you recall earlier, I said there's high weeds almost up to the roof of that carport in the back. And so we let the canine go through there, and we discovered, I'll let you describe what was found since it was your wonderful idea.
Well, thank you, Chris. So the first thing we find, or the dog actually finds, I mean, not us, it's just the dog sniffs it out. Credit to the dog for finding this. And he finds a trash bag kind of in the weeds behind the carport. And so the dog's pawing at that. So obviously we don't let the dog get in that. So we pull the dog off and we open up the trash bag, and in that is a roll of paper towels, washcloth, Solo cup, some paper towels, and a purse.
A washcloth too. Don't forget that.
And so we go through the purse, and of course we find the cell phone and credit cards and cash. So what does that kind of tell you right there?
I bet it was Umi's purse.
It was, and that as detectives, we realized this isn't a robbery, because you're not going to take a purse and then just throw it away right there, and you're going to take everything out of the purse. So that kind of helps eliminate that whole aspect of this crime, just by the dog helping to find that
Well,
purse.
and the fact that it was put in a bag, it wasn't strewn about the yard.
Right.
And as you said, the cards were still there and the cell phone.
And I think what's important too is David described the purse, but also the way it was packaged when you opened the purse. And we all can still remember to this day when we opened it, it was all just very organized. It hadn't gone through. Everything was in a place. The cell phone was on the very top when you opened it. So it was obvious that no one really went through it. They just were worried about getting rid of it.
It was placed there.
Exactly. And then you'll find that it's very interesting that you said that, is that it was placed there, and later on we'll talk about staging and talking about being arranged. That comes into play here in this case as well.
So let me refresh. So now we have Donald as a suspect, and we have maybe an unknown suspect. We have a purse that really hasn't been ransacked, so we can take a robbery out. So we still have an unknown. We still want to keep our minds open for an unknown suspect. But it's becoming slimmer and slimmer that it's a person that's unknown. So at that point, Donald's still staying at the hotel near his house. And that evening, Dave, since he's had a rash of good ideas all of a sudden, and it's day 2, and we still haven't been home, Dave, would you like to describe your idea? And this is perfect TV, no commercial break, police work right here.
I guess it's a technology question. That's why you brought me in. So I decided that we should get a fake purse similar to the one we found and put a GPS tracker in it. And so we thought, Donald may go back to this scene and to see what we found, because he thinks he's smarter than us. And so we know Don is staying right up the street. So we actually put a GPS tracker in a purse, and we go back and we hide it back in the weeds there in hopes that he's going to come. And we all 3 of us and every other detective working, wanted to stay and sit in our car and wait until midnight. But you have to remember, we've been up like 35 hours at this point. And our boss at the time, which I didn't agree with it then, but of course I do now, he made the right decision. He's like, you all have to go home and sleep tonight, because you cannot keep functioning like this. So he calls in another group of people to do surveillance, and they do a different type of surveillance. So anyway, they get set up on this, and lo and behold, in the middle of the night, Don starts leaving his hotel at about 2 a.m. and heading back towards the house. And, of course, we're all asleep now because it's day 2. We have been up 35 hours. And he ended up not going to the house. He got, we think in our minds, he discovered that he was being surveilled. And as detectives, we would have said, we could have done it. But we had been up way too much. We couldn't continue on. So we're back in the office the next day. And we got our sleep. We got our 6 hours of sleep. We come in at 8 in the morning, 10 o'clock. The GPS goes off that it's moving. And we're like, oh, we got him. And
he's staying pretty calm telling this story.
Yeah.
The real thing was, we got him. It's moving. Let's go. We grab our coats off the back of our chair. We're racing to our cars.
We drive out of there so fast, and we go to where the purse is now. And we're like, where's Don? Where's he at? Where's this purse? And we're looking around, and we can you can't do exactly right where it's at. You're in the parking lot, and we see this truck, and it's these guys that are mowing, and we're like, so we go over and kind of look in their truck because they're off eating lunch. There's the purse sitting in their truck. And the guys mowing had found this purse and just picked it up and threw it in their truck and then driven away. We didn't catch anybody with my bright idea.
It was still a good one in your defense.
He slept better the night before because he thought he had a great idea.
He was proud. So you find the purse in the truck.
Yeah.
Dead end.
Yeah, so I'd like to go back too. So prior to that too, we have that round table, and the next morning so she ends up passing, and we end up attending the autopsy.
Right. Would you like to explain about the belt? I'm sure listeners wonder, well, what about the belt around her neck?
So the belt was removed once she went to the medical facility for treatment, but the belt we thought could be important because if it was Donald Southworth that committed this homicide, we would imagine the belt may have came from inside the residence. So after the discovery of the bag with the items inside, we ended up going back and asking or requesting a second search warrant to enter the premises for items that may match up to the items found in the bag, which were the trash bag, the paper towel rolls, the blue Solo cup, the washcloth, and things of that nature. Because as a detective, if you really truly believe this is the individual that committed the crime, there's items inside the residence that probably would connect or would be one and the same of those items as well, right? So we had a second search warrant signed. We entered the premises again lawfully, and once we were inside, we were able to find trash bags that match the trash bags or the trash bag that was in the bushes. We ended up finding paper towels, and most people may not know this, but paper towels actually have a number inside the cardboard roll, and it's a lot number, and you can actually connect rolls of paper towels to the same lot number. And the paper towels inside the residence actually matched the paper towels that we had in the bag. And then also in the residence was the blue Solo cup, which matched blue Solo cups we found in the residence. And the washcloth, why it was so important was we knew that Donald Southworth had stayed at the Holiday at the other hotel that he was staying at previously because he had mentioned saying, I've stayed there before, just take me there. Well, the washcloth was from the hotel he had been staying in and had resided in previously as well. So that was all important. But at the autopsy, so as we're pulling all that evidence, found that Umi had 2 types of injuries. It looked like she had been struck twice in the head, once by what the ME had, the medical examiner had thought would be some type of small hammer type item. And the second item that was used was some type of log, which we actually found lying near her at the crime scene. And we were able to do some testing to show that that was the log that was used to cause the trauma to her head. As far as the belt goes, when we were doing the search warrant, there was a room that the kids had occupied. And if I remember correctly, Chris, weren't there belts hanging on the wall? And they all were very similar to the one that we had found. In fact, at some point in our investigation, we ended up measuring the waist size of the belt to see if it was close in proximity to the other belts. And we ended up showing the belt to the daughters, who said that it was very similar to a belt that they had in their house. So we're on the right track here. It's just, we know it, but can we prove it? Right?
Right. And the other thing we did, and as I mentioned, we want to make sure we cover all our bases. So we did research, and we researched the sex offenders website, and we collected all the names of sex offenders within a 5-mile radius. And so our goal was, if there's any DNA, we need to go out there and swab them. So that's what we ended up doing for several nights. Homeless, sex offenders, we swabbed everybody that was in that area. And we tried to get it to as close a time as it was at the time we thought that the offense occurred.
You know, you're talking about DNA. I remember Bill making one of those phone calls to Don about DNA.
Yeah, so I'll talk about that, but also I want the listeners to know that as all this is going on, we also are collecting the evidence from Umi, and what we used was a physical evidence recovery kit, which is otherwise known maybe in layman's terms as a rape kit. Where we collect physical evidence from the body as far as if the person had been sexually assaulted. Also, we collected her items that were found at the crime scene that we were able to connect to her, which what I mean by that is the nightshirt that Schoon was describing earlier, the log, the belt. There was also the sweater that's like a house coat, I think you described it as, Schoon. Also, these other items from the trash bag. So we collect these items. And what we do at the Lexington Police Department is we actually utilize the Kentucky State Police Lab, and they actually forensically examine our items that we test or are we asked to be tested. So those items are being sent to the lab at the same time as we're doing all this other stuff. So those items are sent to the lab, and then as Dave was saying, we end up moving to, as the investigation moves forward, Donald never really has any contact with any of us after she passes, and doesn't really. We even attend the funeral. Mm-hmm. He is not concerned about what happened to her. In fact, the first time I even talked to him is 8 to 10 days after the homicide, and he calls me twice. And so during those calls, he is more requesting the property. He wants his van back. He wants to know when he can receive the property that we obtained from the house back, but never once asking if we knew or who had harmed his wife, Umi. During those conversations, as I'm talking to him on the phone, he's not in custody. I'm not having to advise him of his rights. He basically is just talking. I'm just sitting there listening. And in one of those conversations that takes place, he starts telling me about how he had thought about searching the crime scene and actually found himself back in the ditch line and had located the box spring that we had found Umi under. And when I began asking him about that, I asked him, well, what do you recall about that? And I think one thing we may have skipped over at the beginning was the initial officer that had found Umi described the box spring on top of her, but also on top of the box spring was a rug that was completely laid out flat, like it had been completely intentionally placed there by someone. And so as I'm talking to Don about this, he tells me that, okay, I think I actually went back there and saw the box spring. In fact, I'm here to tell you that I actually sat on the box spring. And of course, I'm sitting at my desk about ready to fall out of my chair because he's admitting to me that he was actually in the crime scene. But you and I and all of us know as detectives, he knows that there could be a chance we find this DNA that Schoon had mentioned originally in the interview. So now he's having to cover his tracks, right? So in that interview in that conversation on the phone, he tells me he sits on the box spring. I asked him, did you feel like there was a lump underneath it or anything weird or odd about it? And he described no. In fact, he said, I touched the carpet or the rug that was on top of it. And in fact, if there was any blood out there, I'm colorblind, so I don't see red. So there's no way I would have seen that. So I asked him, did you pick up the box spring? He said, I did. I picked up the box spring and I didn't see anything underneath it. So as soon as I hung up the phone, I recorded that conversation. As a detective, typically we all have recorders at our desk. And I had recorded that conversation. I hung up the phone, told Schoon and Dave what we had, which was very important because basically he's obviously trying to cover his tracks, thinking we may have actual DNA at the scene.
Did he say that it did or did not seem odd to him that a box spring with a rug over it would be on the property in which he lived?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because his explanation of that was that he believed that there was some homeless people or a homeless person residing in the backyard area where that box spring was. In fact, there was some information that was provided to us that box spring had been seen placed on the curb and actually carried back to the crime scene by Donald at some point.
Well, did he give an explanation why he would just go sit on it?
Well, he was adamant that was a homeless area back there.
So again, why would he sit on it?
That was just his explanation.
Right. And remember, you want him to keep calling you and talking to you. So if you recall, early in the investigation, he said, my daughter was attached to my hip. Everywhere I went, she went. So, of course, that's great information for us when Bill tells us that he went back there. So what are we going to do? We're going to go talk to his oldest daughter that was attached to his hip and say, did you ever go into No. She claimed they did not go into that wooded area at all. So, again, it works to our advantage every time he starts talking to us.
But we all know when someone mentions I'm colorblind and I can't see red for blood, that's a pretty good indication that maybe he has something to do with this.
Well, and his occupation is a truck driver. Don't you have to pass a color test to get your CDL license?
Yeah.
One would think.
I think that takes us to a big part of this case.
Well, I think we should talk about how we collected the DNA. How many people we're... Go ahead. Explain, Dave. It was...
Well, we talked about Don, and he claimed that was a homeless area. Now, Bill did an excellent job. And, we've been to several homeless camps throughout our career. Unfortunately, crime happens there. And so they all have kind of a common theme. There's cigarette butts, a lot of beer cans, a lot of alcohol bottles, a lot of maybe a fire pit. I mean, we've been to them where there's tents up, cardboard. I mean, that's how these people live. And so there was none of that at this scene. And Bill did such a good job on the stand describing what a homeless camp that we've been to, and there was none of that there. And so, but that didn't mean that we could just negate the fact that Donald said that. We needed to work that. And so, like Schoon said, started pulling the data. Every sexual offender in a 2-3 mile radius of that, we went out and found them. The amazing thing is every one of them, we'd be like, hey, we need to take a swab to see if that's your DNA. Every one of them opened their mouth and was like, I didn't have anything to do with that. Go ahead. They never refused that. And these are guys that have been convicted of sexual offenses in the past, and they knew that they had nothing to do with that.
And one of us asked to play, I'll give you a DNA swab if you'll play basketball or dunk it with me. So obviously, who's going to turn that down when you can get somebody's DNA?
So Schoon showed us his basketball skills and ended up trying to dunk a basketball. We won't say if he made it or not.
I pulled something.
But and then we just started also swabbing people that were in the area. And so if they appeared to be transient and walking by, we'd be like, hey, do you mind if we get a swab? And I don't know if anybody ever said, no, you can't swab me. Like every person, I mean, and these are people that have had outings with the police before. They've been arrested for minor offenses, and we treat everybody with respect. We don't care about your past. That's one of the things that we've always done as homicide detectives. We don't care if you've been arrested for alcohol 20 times. We're going to treat you like a human being, and we'll talk to you like that. And they gave us a swab because they knew they weren't involved in this case. And so we sent all those to the lab, and it ended up being like 40 or 50 swabs of people we sent just to confirm that none of those people in the area were involved in this.
And that's where the Commonwealth comes into play with this as well. This was a joint meeting where that was discussed and asked of us to do that. And that's why it's such a big part of any homicide investigation when you include all the people that would be involved, which would be the detectives and the attorneys that are going to prosecute that case.
In the meantime, we're waiting for the results. Now, several people think it's like on TV where you get your DNA results back in a commercial breaker. Let's be even realistic. Some people think you'll have it back in a week. Well, that's not the case at all. Sometimes it's 6 to 8 months before you ever get the results back. So that's why we continue to investigate this case. And we got a surprise, a call from the Kentucky State Police Lab about, if you remember Bill talking about a PERT kit, the rape kit. I get emotional thinking about it because it was a surprise for me. I'll let Bill describe the results of the sexual assault kit.
So to go back to that day, because I can remember it very vividly, is that we had asked for this evidence to be expedited, and that's one good thing that we have with Lexington Police Department and the Kentucky State Police Lab is we have a very good working relationship. There's a few lab members there that we work very well with, and we asked for this to be expedited because we knew that we needed to get this information as quickly as we could. So the evidence that we were processing, like I explained earlier, which was the trash bags and things like that, people think it's very easy to obtain DNA and fingerprints from things like that. It's not. So we had not located any DNA or fingerprints from any of the evidence we'd already provided from the items found in the bushes. So,
what about the blood on the log?
Well, other than that, I'm talking about like the items found in the trash bag. But yeah, there was blood on the log, so that stuff was still being processed. But I remember sitting at my desk and the lab calls me. They tell me, in fact, it was one specific lab tech, I'm sure it was, if I remember correctly. And she had told me that the perk kit the rape kit had revealed that there was DNA found in Umi's vagina. But in comparison, because we had swabbed Donald at the original interview, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
That night.
So he had provided us with that, and they had compared the semen that was located in Umi to Donald, and it was not a match. So what we had at this point was foreign DNA, foreign semen that did not match Donald Southworth in the victim's vagina.
Did y'all let a collective gasp when you heard that?
So where I'm going with that is I remember getting the information on the phone, being very surprised by that, because if the audience remembers, she was located completely nude. It looked to be some type of sexual assault along with a homicide. So it threw me back. I remember hanging up the phone, and for anyone who's been in our office, it's an open floor plan basically with a bunch of desks. And I remember calling Schoon and Dave, which Dave and I looked at each other across from the desk. That's where we were set up. And asking them to come into our lieutenant's office, which was at the time James Curlis. And it was even hard for me to say it because I didn't know where we were going to be able to go with this. Because we all know how hard it is to prove foreign DNA that doesn't match our suspect, how this is going to work out. So I remember all of us going into James's office, and I just let it out. And we all, just as you said it, Dave, just kind of gasped, and we just didn't know what to say.
What a curveball.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Curveball.
Yeah.
But for a second, were you thinking maybe it was this boyfriend that he kept talking about?
Well, that's the thing is it? Is it another man that had been seeing her and we're not aware of it, and Donald's been trying to tell us the truth? You know, these are all questions we have to ask ourselves. So we are thrown back by this. We decide to step back, and we have another round table, if I remember correctly, in James's office. And anyone who works homicide, there's a lot of talk or conversations that occur in different places. And ours was always in James's office or in Schoon's office, but never in the open because it's between us. We don't need to bring anyone else into it, right?
Right.
And Dave, you know that. I mean, that's just the way homicide works. And so we decided to step back and try to figure out what the best approach would be in this. And is this when we decided that we probably need to try to include the FBI?
Yeah, we were going to start from scratch. That meant her cell phone came in play because we got to believe that now Donald's telling us the truth. So we're starting from ground zero.
And we had reviewed those cell phone records, and there was a lot of conversation. So then it started. These guys traveled to like multiple states to everybody she was texting with and getting swabs from them.
And talking about the cell phone records, Dave brings up a good point. We had went through that information, and the individual that he had accused her having an affair with, we had actually talked to him on the phone at that point. We hadn't done a face-to-face, right? Is that correct?
Over the phone only because he was traveling a lot.
Yeah, and he was like, I'm being completely open with you. I was just providing her some guidance as far as spiritual guidance and maybe even some marital guidance. Mm-hmm. He was like, sure, I was talking to her. And in fact, you can see this on her cell phone. We were texting back and forth, but it's never gone beyond that. Eventually, we ended up, Schoon and I do a face-to-face with him. But at this point, we were actually preparing. So this happened in June, right? And we were actually preparing to go out west for a training. That's the way I remember it, right?
Right.
So we had planned the FBI had invited us to come out to a training in California for a homicide training. And Schoon and I were able to go to that. Well, they were also asking for any detectives attending the training to bring any open case, complex case that they may have to present to their behavioral analysis unit. And what I mean by behavioral analysis unit is basically what you see on Criminal Minds, just to give the audience some idea of who we're talking about.
They don't get the black helicopter.
Or the fancy jet.
And they don't interview people.
Correct. This BAU unit, which was the BAU 2 unit, is that correct? BAU 2.
Right.
That was the ones that handled the adult sex crime homicides.
Right.
Had invited us out there. And so we're like, it's the FBI. Let's see what we can do with this. So
We've seen them on TV.
Yeah. So we pack it up, Schoon, James, and I, and we go out west. And so I remember the day we presented the case because...
And I was very glad it was you, sir.
Let me tell you, these guys drilled me like I was...
Well, let me back up a little bit. It's very unusual that there's 8 behavioral science unit individuals in each group.
Correct.
And they're very rarely together. They fly across the country, and 2 of them will go to police departments and explain these difficult scenes, and they'll evaluate it. Then they'll do a write-up for the police department, and they'll send it to the lead detective. Well, we thought this was a great opportunity. All 8 of them are going to be together in one room. This is a difficult case for us. I remember walking into an amphitheater with several individuals in a U-shape, and I was to take notes. We set that forward right from the beginning, and I think Bill had to testify in front of the Senate committee by the time we were done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recall going into that room not knowing any of these individuals, but feeling almost second class because they made me feel like I wasn't even a detective, that I knew anything I knew about police work, right?
Right.
And this is just also to give the audience some idea of the timeline. We're now in August. This began in June, right? And also I want to remind the audience, this isn't the only case we're working. You don't just get assigned one case and get to hold on to it. We're also still in the rotation. We're also receiving other cases that the homicide unit reviews, which is one, serious crimes against persons, to include serious assaults where, people may be getting shot or stabbed or whatever, but also suspicious death investigations, suicide. So I don't want the audience to believe that, you've had 3 months to work just on this one case. That's not how it works. And it's always been like that. Correct, Dave?
Exactly.
So we ended up going to the training and presenting this case. And I remember going, after presenting it, walking back to the hotel, and we were able to have some beverages. And I remember the FBI coming they were staying with us and providing some condolence.
They were consoling
me.
He was,
because I was a little upset.
You were suicidal. I had to sleep in your hotel room that night.
Yeah.
I was on watch.
Yeah. Because you gotta understand, so it's 2010. I've been in homicide for 8 years. I feel like I'm not an expert, but I'm at least close to knowing what I'm doing. And they made me feel like I knew nothing. But it wasn't anything to them. They were just asking pretty important questions that I felt I had the answers to, but they were also pushing me for more information that I didn't have.
Right. And the thing is, what you have to do prior to going and having your case evaluated by the behavioral science unit, you have to fill out a booklet called the VICAP, which is a violent offenders. It's a booklet that's about 32 pages, and it's detailed.
A victimology.
Yeah. So Bill did all of that. He knew his victim, and and we all agree in the basics. The basics is what they gave us offhand, but they really gave us further information to look into. And we all agree Umi was not a high risk victim at all, except for her marriage, her relationship with her husband. So they gave us a laundry list of things to do. And if we needed a second meeting, that we could do that after the first laundry list was completed. So I thought, well, we're pretty good at our jobs. We'll have probably an arrest before that second meeting is needed.
Yeah, and that comes in October. So I was trying to review some of the information that they were requesting, and like Schoon had mentioned, it's a lot. But the most important, I think, important thing that came out of that meeting, other than me crying, was the general assessment questionnaire.
Yes, the questionnaire was fabulous.
So what this is that it is a questionnaire that the FBI uses and provided to witnesses and victims of crimes that are hard questions, some easy, some hard, that because everyone needs to realize it's sometimes hard to verbalize to someone what had happened in their life versus writing it down. So it makes it a little bit easier for them. So they had provided us with this, what we call as a GAQ, and this was taken back by Schoon and I to Kentucky, along with the long laundry list that they had asked for us to complete. But at the same time, we're also staying in touch with them nonstop. So they are staying completely involved in the case as well as we are. So they're up to speed on everything.
Can I jump in and add, because I've done those before, and I've been to Quantico for one of those meetings, too, on Resendez Ramirez. There are people that are listening to you all today that I know for a fact have had family members go missing or that are struggling with unsolved cases. I know they're in our audience. And it emphasizes the importance of how you have to be brutally honest with the investigators about that family member, and you can't hold a single thing back. And I know that's difficult for people because sometimes they have a loved one that lives a high-risk lifestyle and they try to hide that. But I've always tried to tell them that if you try to hide that, you're going to slow the case down because none of this works without that kind of honesty. So this is a good time to point out to somebody if you're struggling with that, to make sure that you're completely honest about everything about that person that you can figure out, because it's going to really help in the end with that case probably.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, Donald's second wife was very honest.
Hey, you know there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, which is our website, and it has show notes for imagery and audio and video files related to the cases you're going to hear. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube, which has closed caption available for those that are hearing impaired. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you download your podcast from. Subscribe to the Murder Police Podcast and set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.